Nolan leaned against the side of my cubicle, holding a can of something called yerba mate, and asked with a grin, "Do you actually still use bash scripts?" I looked at him for half a second and then turned back to my screen. The nerve of this kid. He'd probably been out of college for 3 years? Maybe 4? Meanwhile, I'd spent 15 building the backbone of this company from a folding table in a server closet that used to be the janitor's break room. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. Vortex Systems used to be a company where you built stuff that worked. Now, it felt like a kindergarten for spreadsheet cowboys and rebranded interns who thought they were revolutionizing enterprise software by renaming buttons. Nolan stood there for a second longer, like he was waiting for me to laugh or say, "Good one." When I didn't, he wandered off, probably back to his beanbag pod or kombucha tasting or whatever they called it. I kept typing, eyes locked on terminal windows. Bash scripts? Yeah. I use them to run database snapshots, automate back-end logs, and deploy updates across 3 continents without downtime. But explaining that to Nolan would have been like explaining electricity to a moth. Truth was, I didn't belong there anymore. It wasn't the same place. Not since CentralLink Solutions swallowed us whole under the bright plastic banner of synergy. They said it was a merger, said we were one team now. But I knew a slow bleed out when I saw one. I'd been through enough CTO transitions and funding rounds to recognize the signs. The guys I'd spent years building this place with, Vince, Paul, Melinda, gone. Some cashed out, some pushed out. Me? I stuck around, kept the lights on, kept the codebase sane. But it was like watching a machine slowly get disassembled while someone kept shouting, "Innovation!" They turned the server room into the cloud collaboration zone. I asked once what that meant, and someone said, "Oh, it's just branding." The rack servers were still there, just hidden behind soundproof glass and a vinyl mural of a sunset. I almost walked out that day. Now I sat in a glass cubicle they called a focus pod, listening to Nolan and his crew run a sprint planning meeting with 6 people who'd never seen a live production error in their lives. And when I opened my email, I saw it, a meeting invite, no subject line, no description, just 6B West, 11:30 a.m. That's when I knew, so I clicked accept and stood up. The door to 6B West was already cracked open, fluorescent lights humming like an MRI machine, AC blasting like they were storing meat in there. I stepped in and closed the door behind me. Alan Worth didn't even look up from the folder in front of him. The HR lady, some CentralLink face I'd never seen, smiled like a hostess seating someone at a funeral. "Kevin," she said, gesturing to the single chair across from them. I sat. No handshake, no pleasantries. Just cold laminate and a stack of printed paperwork sitting dead center on the table. Alan cleared his throat. "We appreciate the years you've given the company, but as part of the operational restructure, your role's been consolidated. No warning, no setup, just that." I stared at him. He kept talking. "You'll be given a standard severance package, 2 weeks' pay, Cobra continuation details, and a non-disparagement agreement. You'll need to sign here and here." He tapped the page with a CentralLink pen, "to acknowledge receipt." The HR rep pushed the folder toward me like I was supposed to thank them for it. I didn't move. Alan finally looked at me. His tie was crooked, hair stiff with gel. He looked like a guy who just Googled how to fire someone 20 minutes ago. "Was anyone from my team consulted?" I asked. Alan blinked. "Your team?" "You know, the engineers who actually understand what I do." He looked at the HR rep, then back at me. "The decision came from a strategic level, based on overlapping functions and legacy system support." I leaned back in the chair. "So, no." Neither of them spoke. That told me everything I needed. I didn't flip the table, didn't shout. I didn't give them the meltdown they were probably coached to handle. I stood up, left the papers where they sat, and walked out of 6B West without saying another word. Back at my desk, I grabbed my stuff. Old headphones, backup drive, a coffee mug with the Vortec logo from 10 years ago. That was it. I kept my eyes down. People around me noticed. A couple side glances, then whispers. Nobody said anything until I hit the integration row. Some guy with gelled hair and a CentralLink hoodie, couldn't have been older than 27, grinned and asked, "Hey, you transferring or something?" I didn't even blink, just kept walking. Elevator opened, I stepped in. Doors closed behind me. I was out. No speech, no, "we'll miss you." Not even a damn handshake from anyone I'd worked alongside for over a decade. That building used to feel like mine. Now it felt like I'd been squatting in it without knowing. I hit the parking garage and made it to my car before I let out a breath. Not some dramatic sigh. Just air I'd been holding in since the meeting started. Started the engine, hands on the wheel. Then I just sat there. 15 years. 15 years of uptime reports, last-minute fixes, late-night outages, patch notes, migrations, performance audits. All wiped out in a 5-minute HR script, read by a guy who once called Jason Java code. It wasn't even personal. That's what stung. They hadn't fired me. They'd just deleted a row in a spreadsheet. Back home, I tossed my stuff on the kitchen counter. The mug rolled and clattered. I stood there in silence, still wearing my badge like some kind of idiot. They cut me like you'd cut a cable, quick, silent, without looking back to see what went dark. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat on the couch, and stared at the wall. My laptop bag was still at my feet, zipped, like I was going to head back in the next morning. But I wasn't. I wasn't going back, and they knew that before I did. I spent the next morning sitting in my flannel robe, hunched over the kitchen table with 2 tabs open. One was a resume template, the other was LinkedIn. It was brutal. Every job post read like a parody of itself. Seeking a hungry disruptor with a move-fast mindset and no respect for limits. What the hell does that even mean? I built core infrastructure. I didn't break rules to spark innovation. I made sure people's crap didn't crash on a Tuesday. Half the listings wanted someone who could own the full stack and evangelize agile values. One even listed relentless optimism as a required trait. I closed the tab before I started throwing things. Then I figured I'd check my 401k, see how far I could coast if no one wanted a guy who still debugged in Vim. I dug through the drawer in my office, old chargers, expired insurance cards, a zip drive for some reason, until I found the folder where I used to keep tax records and benefit stuff. That's when I saw it. A thick leather folder, black with the old silver Vortex stamp. The one Vince gave me the week after I signed on full-time. God, that was forever ago. Back when we were still running on bare metal servers and hand-assembling blade racks in a rented space behind a carpet store. I opened it. Inside, my original employment contract, not digital, printed, bound, real. Pages were stiff, edges yellowing a bit. Vince had written notes in the margins, sloppy, fast handwriting in blue ink. There were tabs on clauses, a post-it that just said, "Keep this version," and at the back, a separate sheet of paper signed by him in pen. It was titled Section 14, Change of Control. I read it once, then again, then a third time. It was real. Vince had written it in himself and signed it, his actual signature, not a scan. It said if I was terminated without cause within 12 months of a change in ownership, I got full vesting of my equity and a payout equal to the weighted value of my last 3 RSU grants. All of it. I stood up, heart pounding, grabbed my phone, checked the calendar. CenturyLink closed the deal on July 17th. They fired me. 41 days later. 41. I walked in circles through the living room. I hadn't signed anything that could have overridden this. I was pretty damn sure of it. Every document CenturyLink sent me after the merger was boilerplate onboarding garbage. Codes of conduct, cybersecurity policy, cloud drive usage, nothing that nullified my original contract. And they never once mentioned this clause. Not in the firing, not in the exit folder, not in any of the paperwork that cold-eyed HR rep slid across the table. I went back to my desk, sat down, and laid the folder out flat in front of me. My hands were still shaking, but my head was clear now. They wanted me out. Fine. But they were going to pay for it. I scanned the folder one last time, made sure the clause was real, the signatures legit, and then picked up the phone. "Call Dana Felton," I said to no one in particular. I still had her number in a group chat with some old Vortex folks. She'd helped one of them squeeze a nice chunk out of a toxic exit package 2 years back. She picked up on the second ring. "Felton. Dana, it's Kevin. Kevin Rusk. Used to be with Vortex." Pause. Then, "Rusk? Damn, I haven't heard that name in a while. You get caught in that CenturyLink merger mess? I've got something you need to see." Her office was in a brick building above a Vietnamese restaurant. 3 floors up with no elevator. I walked in, folder under my arm, past a busted reception desk and a cat sleeping on a pile of legal pads. Donna's door was open. She waved me in without looking up. Glasses low on her nose, hair in a loose bun, desk overflowing with binders, court docs, candy wrappers, and what looked like a paperweight shaped like a middle finger. I dropped the folder on top of the mess. She flipped it open and started reading, mouth tight. I didn't say a word. 30 seconds in, she whistled, long and low. "Buddy," she said, tapping the page, "this clause is steel reinforced. Who wrote this?" "Vince, back when he was still running things." Dana grinned. He knew how to protect his people. Section 14, change of control, unvoided unless explicitly renegotiated in writing. That's airtight. She kept reading. "You held on to your shares?" 61,000, I said. She blinked. "You know the multiplier?" 1.75. Dana leaned back in her chair. "Acquisition was, what, 112 a share?" "Correct." She opened her laptop, typed fast, then turned it toward me. A spreadsheet was already populating. 61,000 times 112 times 1.75. She sat back. "That's 11.9 million, pre-tax." I didn't say anything. She raised an eyebrow. "And they didn't even mention this clause when they canned you?" "Not a word." Dana leaned forward, both elbows on the desk. "Then let's make some noise. You don't ask, you demand." She started drafting on the spot. Sharp language, zero fluff. She cited the clause by number and title, quoted the firing date, attached the acquisition date, referenced the RSU history and vesting schedule, laid out exact payment expectations, line by line. "Who are we addressing this to?" she asked without looking up. "CenturyLink Legal, but C.C. Allen Worth. He's the VP who sat across from me when they pulled the trigger." She smirked. "Great. Let's drop this right in his lap." By the time she printed it, the letter was 6 pages long, stapled once in the top corner, bold type in all the right places. 7 copies, she said, pulling out envelopes. Certified mail, paper trail, no, we never got it nonsense. She dropped each one in a labeled envelope and slapped a yellow post-it on the top. Demand, compliance required. I watched her seal the last one. "This is going to land like a live grenade," she said. "Good." She stood up, walked them to her assistant's desk, and came back brushing her hands together like she'd just taken out the trash. "They try to lowball you, stall, or play dumb. I handle it. You don't respond to anything until I say so." I nodded. "And Kevin," she added, pointing a pen at me, "this isn't just a paperwork screw-up. This is fireable incompetence on their end. Executives don't forget clauses like this. They bury them. Someone thought you'd roll over." I smiled for the first time in days. They were wrong. By the time I got home from Dana's office, I already had 2 voicemails. One from someone in employee relations, asking to schedule a check-in. The second from a CenturyLink VP I'd never met. Something about revisiting the terms of your transition. I didn't call back. The next morning, there were 3 more, then 6. Then a missed call from an unknown number every hour on the hour like clockwork. Every voicemail had that same greasy tone. Overly friendly, overly vague, overly desperate. By the end of the second day, the mask dropped. That's when I got the email. Subject line, constructive conversation opportunity. From Craig Renner, EVP of Strategic Risk. Full of corporate cream cheese about de-escalation, open dialogue, and mutual understanding. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. 15 minutes later, he called. "Kevin, glad you could take the time. Appreciate it." I let the silence drag just long enough for him to sweat. Then, talk. "Well, first off, I want to express, on behalf of CenturyLink, our genuine appreciation for your long-term commitment to building the systems we now all rely on. You know I don't work there anymore, right?" "Right, yes, of course. I meant, look, I'll cut to it. I've reviewed the documents Dana Felton sent, and while the company disputes certain interpretations of the clause, we're interested in resolving this in good faith." I leaned back in my chair. "Define good faith." "We're prepared to offer you a severance enhancement of $180,000, taxable, in exchange for releasing further claims." I snorted. "You call that good faith?" He fumbled. "It's a substantial increase from the original 2-week package and..." Craig, I said flatly, that's a joke. You owe me 11.9 million. Try again. There was a pause. Then he shifted gears. Look, Kevin, if we get into litigation, it's going to get expensive. For everyone. There's reputational risk. There's discovery. We believe it's better to resolve this constructively. Then wire the money. Click. A few hours later, Dana forwarded me an email from CenturyLink Legal. Subject, urgent, legal notice regarding Rusk matter. They weren't offering anymore. They were threatening. Their letter accused me of potential data mishandling, failure to return proprietary assets, and, my personal favorite, breach of fiduciary duty during transitional operations. I called Dana the second I finished reading it. She picked up and said, "Let me guess, scare tactics? They're accusing me of stealing data." She actually laughed. "Kevin, if they had a case, we'd already be in court. That's just empty chest puffing." They mentioned proprietary assets. "Yeah, the mug you took from your desk is probably national security. Relax, this is textbook bluff. They're trying to rattle you. It means they know you're holding a grenade. What do we do? Nothing, let them sweat." And they did. The next morning, I got another voicemail. This one almost pleading, another CenturyLink exec. New name, same tone. "We'd like to understand your expectations and reach a constructive path forward." My expectations? $11.9 million wired to my bank account, plus a nice round of corporate humiliation, while they scrambled to figure out who'd screwed up and how deep it went. But I didn't say that. I didn't say anything. I blocked the number and made coffee. Same brand, same mug, same quiet kitchen. They wanted me to crack, to doubt, to panic. I wasn't the one panicking. They were. I wasn't posting anything, wasn't emailing, wasn't taking calls. But the messages started anyway. First it was Rob from DevOps, just a text. "Heard what happened. You good?" Then Sharon from the old security team DM'd me on LinkedIn. "Legal's asking weird questions. You might want to check your back trail." I didn't answer either one. Didn't need to. The fact they were reaching out told me everything I needed to know. CenturyLink was scrambling. More started trickling in. Some were cautious, asking if I had a lawyer, asking what my endgame was. Others just said, "Stay strong," like they were watching a guy go up against the mob. Then I got one from someone I barely remembered, one of the junior data analysts from the merger team. "Heard you sent a letter. HR's freaking out. Alan's name keeps coming up." That made me sit up. A couple hours later, my phone rang. It was Dana. I answered on the first ring. "Alan Worth," she said. "Just got put on administrative leave." I blinked. "Seriously?" "Yeah, and get this. HR's internal memo says he failed to perform due diligence before executing your termination. They're throwing him under the bus like it's a company policy." I let out a short breath, not quite a laugh. "They're getting ready to feed him to the wolves, Kevin," Dana added. "You know what that means. They're looking for someone to blame." "Exactly." I stood up and started pacing. He hadn't even read my original contract. Probably just skimmed whatever CenturyLink fed him. Clicked through digital signatures, checked the boxes, moved on. Now he was the crack they needed to explain the mess. "They still haven't responded to our last letter," I said. "They're scared," she said. "They know you're holding a live clause, and now they've got proof Alan fumbled the whole thing." I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and stared out the window. A week ago, I was the guy nobody looked in the eye on his way out. Now, I was the guy shaking the tower. I didn't feel smug. Not yet. But I could feel the shift. They weren't just covering their asses anymore. They were hunting for someone to take the fall. The call came just after 9 a.m., right as I was pouring coffee. "Kevin," Dana said. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the smirk behind it. "It's done. They're folding. Full payout, no settlement, wired today." I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, staring at the steam coming off the mug. "You still there?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm here." The board caved last night. Legal signed off this morning. Turns out airtight contracts actually matter when you put them in writing and don't lose the damn folder. I sat down at the kitchen table, phone still to my ear. The light coming through the blinds cut across the table in stripes. "They gave us the full amount?" "Every cent," she said. "No conditions, no NDA, just wired it. 11.9 million and some loose change. Want the exact number?" I'll check it myself. And Alan, I asked. Fired, she said, officially for failure to follow executive protocol and high-risk terminations, which is legal speak for he screwed the pooch. I didn't gloat, didn't fist pump, I just took a sip of my coffee. Congrats, Dana added. You just made a corporation flinch. I hung up and logged into my bank account. The number hit me all at once. 11,617,042. It didn't look real. It looked like a glitch. Like the kind of typo that gets you a follow-up email with the subject, oops. But it was real. I sat there with one hand on the mouse, staring at the number while the coffee went cold. I didn't feel rich. I felt right. They hadn't given me anything. No gift, no reward. They'd paid what they owed. And for once, they had to sweat to do it. The same people who smiled through my firing, who walked me out without a glance, who bet I wouldn't read my own contract, they were now a signature short of a press scandal. They folded because they couldn't afford what came next. I didn't need a yacht or some big revenge moment. This was enough. They bled for it. My phone buzzed again. News alert from one of those industry blogs. CenturyLink executive departs amid legal oversight controversy. Alan's name was buried halfway down the article, along with a sentence about internal process reviews and restructuring compliance workflows. Translation, they were still scrambling. I refreshed the bank page once more. Still there. Every dollar. The next morning, I walked the trails behind my house, the ones that cut through the woods just past the drainage ditch and loop around the old water tower. It was early, sun barely up, air sharp with that early fall bite, leaves still green but curling. The kind of quiet you don't get in an office, just wind in the trees and the steady sound of my boots crunching gravel. Halfway through the loop, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out. One new email. Subject line, holy sh*t. It was from Jerome, one of the few engineers still hanging on at CenturyLink. The guy who used to sit 2 pods over from me. Smart, quiet, never talked unless he had something worth saying. You pulled the pin, man. Word is the board flipped when they saw the clause. Alan's toast. HR is in full damage control mode. Legend stuff. Drinks on me if you're ever in town. I stared at the message for a second, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Thought about typing something. Thanks maybe, or let's catch up. But I didn't. I just locked the screen and kept walking. Back home, I pulled the leather folder out from under the stack of old tax files in my office drawer, the same one Vince handed me all those years ago. I didn't read it again. I just walked it down the hall, opened the closet, and slid it into the fireproof box I kept at the bottom. No need to look at it anymore. The war was over. I didn't launch a startup, didn't buy a car, didn't do any of the big revenge success moves people like to post about online. I just sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of the same cheap coffee I'd been drinking for years, pulled up an old repo on my laptop, spent the morning reading through my own code, line by line, clean stuff, efficient, forgotten by most, but still running. That was enough, because it was never about the money. What stuck with me was the look on their faces, those last calls, the desperate emails, the shift in their voices when they realized the redundant guy they dumped in a glass box had been sitting on the deed to their entire mess the whole time.